Welcome to Next Gen Manufacturing. Today, we're going to decode one of the most critical and honestly most misunderstood parts of any advanced project, the engineering contract. We're going to translate all that dense legalese and technical jargon into a simple user's guide. The goal? To help you get projects done right and sidestep the traps that can sink them before you even start.
So let me ask you something. When you think about the risks on a big engineering project, what's the first thing that pops into your head? A bridge collapsing? A software bug? Maybe a critical miscalculation? Yeah, those are all very real dangers for sure, but the biggest risk is often the one that's hiding in plain sight.
That's right. The single biggest point of failure can actually be the contract itself. You got to think of this document as the project's DNA. One small misunderstanding of its terms can be way more catastrophic than any technical mistake. You see, success isn't just about building amazing things. It's about building them on a rock-solid legal foundation.
Okay, so here's the crucial thing to understand. Every single engineering contract is basically a conversation between two totally different worlds. It's written in two distinct languages, the language of the engineer and the language of the lawyer. This right here really breaks it down. On one side, you have the engineers. They look at a contract and see a project blueprint. They're thinking about technical specs, how the work is going to flow, and just practical reality. For them, there are shades of gray. But for lawyers, it's a whole different ballgame. They see a set of absolute rules. They're thinking about rights, liability, and what you're obligated to do. For them, it's black and white. A document is either legally binding or it's not. That's it. And that's why this explainer is going to be your translator between these two worlds.
So, to really get inside the lawyer's mindset, we need to start with this ancient principle that's the foundation for pretty much every contract ever written. It sets the absolute rule of the game.
Pacta Sunt Servanda. It's a fancy Latin phrase that basically just means agreements must be kept. And when they say must, they mean it. It means that a legally solid agreement becomes the law between the people who made it. It's not a suggestion, it's not a guideline, it's an unbreakable promise that carries the full force of law. This is the bedrock.
And this quote just nails the practical result of that principle. It's from the spirit of the French Civil Code, and it means the project manager has to execute the contract, all of the contract, and nothing but the contract. Any little change, no matter how practical it seems, is technically a breach unless everyone formally agrees to it.
Now, this is where that difference in mindset can cause huge problems. An engineer might talk about an applicable document, which to them means you gotta follow it, and a reference document, which is more like a helpful guide. But a lawyer, they only see two buckets, binding or not binding. Just imagine the chaos if an engineer treats a legally binding document like it's just a reference. This is exactly where the fights start.
Okay, let's look at how this all plays out between the two key players in this whole contractual dance: the clients, the one who wants the project done, and the engineer, the one tasked with making it happen.
Now, the client isn't just sitting on the sidelines writing checks. They have some really important jobs. They're on the hook for providing the project's foundation, all the info and permits. And this is key, they hold the ultimate power. They are the final authority to accept or reject the finished work.
And the engineer, their main duty is to perform their work according to the rules of the art. That's a formal way of saying they need to meet the accepted professional standards for their field. They have to act with professional independence, even from the client, to make sure the project is designed and built correctly and safely. But let's be real, no project ever goes exactly according to plan. So how do these two groups, with their different languages and duties, handle the fact that things are going to change? Well, this is one of the biggest sources of friction you'll find.
There is only one safe way to do this: a formal process. A quick verbal go-ahead in the hallway is an absolute recipe for disaster. First, the client has to request the change. Then, the engineer analyzes the impact on cost, time, and scope. And only when both sides formally sign a modification form does that change actually become part of the contract. Remember, nothing but the contract.
And here we go again with the language barrier causing potential chaos. An engineer might ask for a post-production waiver to accept a part that's a little bit off, but still works perfectly fine. But from a legal perspective, what they're really asking for is a waiver, which means the client is giving up their legal right to get a perfectly compliant product. The engineer's thinking about a physical object, the lawyer's thinking about an abstract legal right. And the list goes on. What an engineer might call a pre-production waiver is usually just called a deviation. A small technical amendment that doesn't really affect the end user is
legally speaking, an endorsement to the contract. The key takeaway here is that using the wrong word can have huge unintended legal consequences. A clear glossary in the contract is your absolute best friend.
But what happens when the terms get mixed up, a change doesn't get documented, and something breaks? Okay, let's talk about liability and how lawyers and engineers think about failure in completely different ways. So in many legal systems, like in France, there's this critical difference between an obligation of means and an obligation of result. An obligation of means is like a doctor. They promise to use all their professional skill to help you, but they can't guarantee a cure. An obligation of result, on the other hand, is a guarantee. You promise to deliver a specific outcome, period. This difference is massive because it totally flips who has to prove what when something fails.
This whole language thing continues right down to the words we use. For a lawyer, a fault is a breach of duty, and they often use it to mean the same thing as a failure. But to an engineer, oh no, these words are very specific. A defect is a physical flaw. A failure is the event when something stops working. A failure might be caused by a defect, but they are not the same thing. And that precision is absolutely essential if you want to find the root cause of a problem. But it can get totally lost in a legal argument.
So, what should a good contract actually plan for? Well, the scope of risk is kind of staggering when you think about it. We're not just talking about common accidents. A really solid contract anticipates everything from the mechanical risk of a stretched spring to the chemical risk of certain solvents, all the way to the natural risk of solar radiation. It even accounts for human stuff, like overconfidence, what they call the ethos of virtuosity, and even mental things like misinterpretation or sabotage.
And all of this brings us to the ultimate takeaway. The best contract isn't some weapon you keep locked away for a future lawsuit. It's a living document. It's a user manual for the project that everyone agrees to follow. Its main job should be to create clarity and stop disputes before they can even start.
So, I'll leave you with this question for your next project. Take a good look at your key documents. Are they written in one language or the other? Or have you managed to build a bridge and create a document that speaks both? Because in the world of next-gen manufacturing, making sure the technical and legal teams are clearly communicating, well, that's the first rule for building anything that's designed to last.